After viewing top secret videos that showed extraterrestrials, Representative Anna Paulina Luna officially stated that based on the top secret videos that she looked at, that aliens, extraterrestrials were actually interdimensional beings. So how can these beings from other dimensions interact with us? What is the connection between DMT and our ability to interact with what we have heard of being called machine elves, who oftentimes are the exact same kinds of entities, mantises, light beings, and others, that people have experienced who do human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials. So I'm going to be going through all of this, how DMT works, how DMT allows us to access higher dimensions. Why are we able to do this? Is there a way to interact and communicate with these higher dimensions and higher dimensional beings without having to ingest DMT? Or is there a way to get our brains to naturally produce enough DMT to allow us access? I'm going to look at all of these things in this video today. So let's get started. All right, so what's the ETs, DMT, elves connection? DMT is naturally released in the brain at birth, death, and during spiritual experiences. DMT, therefore, seems to have proven itself to be the gateway for the soul to access other dimensions. So it has been documented that babies, when they come into existence, when physically are birthed, their brain is releasing huge amounts of DMT. So what would be the point of that? The baby having some strange psychedelic experience? Well, if it's going in reverse, if the soul needs to be able to have some, way to fit itself into a smaller dimension and allow the soul to have that conscious experience safely, then if we reverse engineer it, if DMT is the way people experience higher dimensions and higher dimensional beings, then that would seem to indicate the fact that babies release lots of DMT. That would seem to indicate that it allows the soul to enter into this dimension. So the same is true at death. We know that at death, the brain releases massive amounts of DMT. And of course, that would be what happens when people artificially, externally consume DMT. They have perhaps the same kind of experience that people have at death when they shift into new dimensions or be able to see new dimensions. So I can tell you from personal experience, in case you didn't know my background, I am a contactee, an extraterrestrial contactee. I have been in regular contact with higher dimensional extraterrestrials for the past 4 years since I first did human-initiated contact, also known as CE5 protocols. I had such a powerful experience after doing it. I mean, I really pushed it and I worked hard at it. The third time, I had an extremely powerful experience. I'll put a link in the description where I interacted with a red mantis being. I've later contact experiences, I saw his ship come in from the clouds. So for me, this is not theory, this is reality. So when people talk about what happens when they take DMT and the beings they interact with, I'm like, yeah, I know. I have interacted with those beings. So DMT seems to be the one thing that ties it all together. So the question is, how do we stimulate it naturally? I can tell you from personal experience that simple contact with higher dimensional beings will release DMT in the brain. I have some ideas about what the mechanism for that is, and perhaps we'll get into that. So let's keep going. So large amounts of externally ingested DMT results in communications with the same entities as people have in near-death experiences, ET encounters, and spiritual visitations. They're the same types of beings. They're light beings, oftentimes mantis beings, what I call earth beings. Earth beings are what we would call fairies, elves, gnomes. So it turns out that these are actual beings. They're not part of our dimension. And when I get into it, we'll talk about what mantis beings really are. And when you understand that, you'll understand earth beings, fairies, elves, other kinds of beings. That will start to make sense as to what those are and how they can exist all around us and be in the same physical space as us, but we don't necessarily know that they're there. And so let's keep going. All right, so number 3, limitations of externally ingested DMT. So externally ingested DMT, when you smoke it or you take it or whatever form, if it's injected into you, there are limitations to this. Now, the one form of externally ingested DMT that does not have these same limitations is when it's injected over long term. So, by the way, I'm not recommending that you take any external chemical, because I'm going to share with you how you can have the same kinds of experiences that I have and what the benefits are. So there's some downsides to taking external DMT. One of them is the duration. Like if you smoke it or however you take it, your experience is going to be very short-lived. So you can't really explore and learn a lot and communicate a lot because you barely just barely started figuring out what's going on, where you are, and there's all kinds of other crazy things that happen during this, which I completely understand because those same kinds of things happen when you have contact with higher dimensional beings. The same kind of thing, kind of emotional and psychological things happen. So this creates a severe limitation because you can't really get a good grip on where you are and what's going on because you're not there for very long. So short duration results in reduced ability to naturally create and release DMT. So the other thing is that this is true with any chemical, doesn't matter. One of the reasons that at 60, almost 63, I have not done testosterone replacement therapy is, number one, my body seems to be at a level. I mean, I wish I was 20 years younger, but I seem to have enough to be able to do everything I want to do, and there's side effects to it. But one of the things is that if I go on it, I have to stay on it for the rest of my life because I will be telling my pituitary gland to stop producing testosterone for the rest of my life. So that's a huge commitment, but that's what happens when you ingest any chemical that your brain naturally produces. So taking huge amounts of DMT, you're telling your brain to stop producing it. So that means it's going to take you longer to be able to produce it again, which is why a lot of people who do DMT trips, they don't become addicted in the same sense as like alcohol or weed or other things, but they become dependent on it if they want to have those kinds of experiences. So that's another drawback. Externally ingesting it will give you a dependence on it. Your brain will reduce its ability to naturally produce it. Let's see. So the brain treats it. Here's the one that really is most important to me is that when you take external DMT, down in the last couple of sentences there, the brain treats it as a drug trip instead of actual reality. So that means that that's always going to be there. Now, there are people, just to prove this point, there are people who they've got chat groups who are committed DMT users, and they do it regularly. And they're split in half. Half of the people say they're experiencing actual reality, and the other half say, no, it's just an illusion of the brain. It's just a drug trip. So that is something that I've noticed. with people that I've observed who talk about it, there's a part of it that says, yeah, that's what happened when I took this drug. And so there's a part of you that doesn't see it as part of this reality. And so that's over there and this is over here, and it doesn't get integrated. Or worse than that, whatever experiences or things you learned over there, when you're back here, you're back in reality, and you go, well, reality, that's not the real thing. So it creates this duality within you, and that to me is a limitation. And then you have limited ability to integrate the interdimensional experience into real life. This is probably the biggest one in my mind, because what I've learned doing this naturally, communicating with higher dimensional beings naturally and using natural means to increase the DMT in my brain so that I can have longer experiences and continued experiences, is that I'm more able to integrate it into my reality. So my reality isn't third dimensional or fifth dimensional. It's now turning into a multi-dimensional experience. So this is, to me, again, another reason to do it naturally instead of artificially and externally. All right, so number 4, what if humans could achieve this interdimensional connection without ingesting DMT? So I've already kind of hinted about that. And I'm declaring that I've learned how to do that. Now, the enjoyable thing to know is that this has been going on for thousands of years. That we know that the brain on a daily basis probably produces small amounts of DMT, and in other experiences produces a lot. And the ancients didn't think of it as a chemical, but they were doing this when they did Kundalini yoga, when they did high levels of energy work, when they did Qigong, when they did rituals, and of course when they took psychedelics. People really get really dependent on psychedelics, and self-righteously they get dependent on psychedelics. But the truth is, like, for instance, let me give you an example. We know that the early Vedics, we're talking 4,000 plus years ago, the people that wrote down the Vedas, we know that they consumed a beverage that they called soma. And we don't know what was in it. Some people think they know what was in it, but I don't think they do. But clear it was a psychedelic, and I'm sure it produced a lot of DMT in the brain, and they were able to go and channel from higher dimensions the Vedic songs that we know as the Vedas, the mantras and all those things. And at some point they stopped doing it. So you have to ask yourself, why did they stop doing it? Well, because then the yogis started to develop really high-level meditative practices, because the Vedas were focused on ritual. In fact, if you're a pure Vedic, like there are people that want to go back to the original Vedic practices, it's all about ritual. And now when we talk about Hindu practices, it is ritual, but it's also focused on meditation and yoga, self-created meditative experiences. Short answer is they found out practices that create DMT within the brain naturally. So you train your brain to create more, and you can do it on command. Can't do that if you ingest it. So again, the Vedics chose to stop using psychedelics, and the only reason they would do that is because they had a better method. Same thing is true with Taoism. The Taoist mystics, they were able, there's legends about this stuff that the Taoist mystics were able to achieve, including immortality, where they completely shift, where their body disappears and they leave this world. And so I can tell you from personal experience, I'm a Mao Shan Qigong teacher. I've achieved a level of mastery in that, and I can tell you that the level of DMT that gets released doing those practices is off the charts, and it's completely natural. So again, the Taoists did the same thing. At some point, they stopped using psychedelics a very long time ago. So the only reason they would do that is if they found a better method. Okay, so what if humans could achieve this interdimensional connection without ingesting DMT? Spiritual practices that train the brain to release DMT include Qigong, meditation, lucid dreaming. We know that dreaming, I believe I heard that dreaming involves release of DMT. So those are ways that we can do that. Lucid dreaming is a great practice, but again, it's not very reliable in terms of reality. And I could make a whole video on that. I've done some of that, so I can talk about it, but let's keep on subject here. Okay, so ET contact results in massive DMT release. I know that from personal experience. CE5 protocols allow for conscious ET contact with ETs without external DMT ingestion. So this is something that you're going to have to experience. So I say this all the time. There are people who come on to my channel, watch my videos, and they will leave comments as though they know what I'm talking about and they've had the experience, and they'll say, I met so-and-so or the God so-and-so or Yeshua or Archangel Michael. And I can tell by the way that they talk that they're not doing CE5 or interdimensional meditation. They've had some kind of personal experience, and so because they believe they've had a personal experience, they think it's the same as having actual interdimensional contact. And anyway, I can tell the difference. And the only reason that I can tell the difference is because I've had both kinds of experiences. If you haven't, you won't be able to. So I can tell when somebody's making something up, because there's plenty of people who do that. I can tell when somebody's deluded, because the kind of delusions they come up with don't line up with what actually happens. And I can tell people who are sincere and sharing experiences, but I know they haven't had the same kind of experiences I do. So I am making this distinction. I am making the distinction that CE5 protocols, human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials, is the most direct way now, the most direct way to have interdimensional contact. So there's all kinds of things, that factors involved that can, make that work or not work, and I could again make videos about that. But my personal experience, what I'm getting to, the short story is that actual physical interdimensional contact with beings from a higher dimension involves very powerful electromagnetic energy on a frequency that stimulates your brain into massive production of DMT. And some people are better at it than others, and there's reasons for that. And this is one of the reasons this channel is here, so that I can help you have these experiences on command, if you wish. That's my goal. Okay, so ET contact results in massive DMT release. Protocols allow for conscious ET contact without external DMT ingestion. Number 7, ET contact allows for repeated connection to what people call the machine elves that can be integrated into conscious understanding and interaction with real life. So one of the things that I do, as opposed to people who do out-of-body experiences, or as opposed to people who have had near-death experiences, I've had those experiences as well, so I understand that. But what I do, what I call interdimensional meditation, is I am in a meditative state, but I'm fully conscious and I'm fully awake, and I'm having these very bizarre, mind-bending experiences, and I'm able to integrate that into my third-dimensional reality. Again, if you have an out-of-body experience, you can't do that. If you have, you'll remember it and you'll know it, but it'll be that out-of-body thing I did. If it's because of, as we've talked about earlier, if it's because of psychedelics, then it'll be, well, that was that drug trip I had, and here's my other reality. If you have a near-death experience, it's like, oh, that's when I died and I left my body, and now I'm back here. So what is happening with me, and I think with others that are following me and following my practices and instructions, is that you're able to integrate the two. Now that has its own very, very intense, weird, that's a very, very weird thing to experience. And in fact, you believe you're going crazy. I wondered in the beginning, especially, if I was having some kind of psychosis. And at the time, I had a psychologist I was talking to, and I ran everything by him, and he said, no, you're having an experience for sure, and you seem to have a good grasp on reality. And there were other things that weren't involved. There wasn't the grandiose, narcissistic kind of superiority that usually happens with people that are losing their mind in that way. And some of the other really negative things. When people have a psychotic experience, it's usually very negative, and there's a lot of negative voices and experiences and all that, and all kinds of other symptoms. And I didn't have any of those things. So the only conclusion is either what I'm experiencing is real or I've lost my mind. And when I actually went through and tried to find out, I think I've lost my mind, I found out that objectively, no. In fact, I'm better psychologically than I was. So the only other conclusion is that this is real. So once you get to that point, then you start to integrate. You start to integrate higher dimensions into your third dimensional reality. And that's a whole trip in and of itself. But that is the goal. And that is why I do the work that I do. That's why I don't do out-of-body experiences in order to have this. That's why I don't do, I don't do psychedelics. This is the fastest way to physically, psychologically, and spiritually begin to bridge that gap and to become multidimensional. In fact, the beings that I worked with said to me at one point, they said, you are going to start becoming a multidimensional being. That means that I'm fully here in this third dimension, and I can also go into higher dimensions a lot of times at will, simultaneously. Would you like to learn how to do this? That's what this channel is all about. So, so that's number 7. So now let's get into some really cool specifics of who these beings are. So first off, I want to tell you that almost everything that you're hearing through the media is a lie. First off, you need to know that Anna Paulina Smith is right. Extraterrestrials are not third-dimensional beings from other planets. They are interdimensional beings. They may be from other planets, and many of them are from Earth. The beings that we call what we've mislabeled as the Lemurians actually are the fairies, the elves, the gnomes, and they are on a higher frequency, but they are merged with the Earth. They're here around us all the time, and you can interact and communicate with them. They're incredibly loving, beautiful, amazing beings, but you have to be able to get on their frequency in order to be able to experience them. And so those beings are from Earth. They're beings that are from inner Earth. All that is real too. They're just beings on a different frequency. Some of those beings do come up and manifest in the third dimension in strange, weird ways. So a lot of people are saying that ETs aren't from other planets and galaxies, they're from Earth. That is partially true, but there are also higher dimensional beings that are physical but on a higher frequency, and they are from other planets. And there are extraterrestrials. This is where it gets really trippy. There are extraterrestrials who are not physical, and yet they are also from other star systems and other places in our universe. And they can shapeshift and manifest in ways where we think we're looking at, for instance, the Pleiadians are a good example. Does it sound ridiculous to you that Pleiadians are blonde-haired, tall, Nordic-looking? Does that sound ridiculous to you? Of course it does, because it is ridiculous. Except that is how they have chosen to manifest when they come to Earth. And that is because one of the earliest peoples that they worked with were ancient Nordic people, and they created an affinity with them. And so to make them feel comfortable, they would manifest that way. But I've seen what they really look like, and they're not physical at all. I've talked about what they really look like, which was very shocking to me. So there are physical extraterrestrials on other planets in higher frequencies, and then there are extraterrestrials that are beings that aren't physical in the way we understand, but they come here also. So there's both. There's beings from Earth and outside of Earth, but none of them are from our Earth third dimensional experience. The Earth third dimensional experience is limited to humans, animals, insects in the third dimension. Everything else that comes to Earth are from higher dimensions. There are also negative beings, and those are from lower dimensions. Those are all worth videos in and of themselves. All right, so let's talk about it. So the different types of interdimensional entities I've experienced. Number one is humans who have died. So one of the first things that happened, which I wasn't looking for. Bear in mind, so you should know this, that when I did CE5 the first time in June of 2022, I did not believe that it was possible for aliens to exist. And I was going off of third dimensional science. My dad was an astrophysicist. He used to design satellites. So that's my background. That's how I looked at things. And from a third dimensional scientific perspective, it was impossible for beings from hundreds, thousands, millions of light years away to come to Earth and just on a vacation. It just doesn't happen. But when I saw Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is a movie, you can watch it on YouTube by Dr. Stephen Greer. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Watch it. It'll blow your mind. When I saw that, and I saw video evidence of people having experiences with beings that clearly weren't human and clearly weren't part of this dimension, I said, if that's real, I have to experience that. So I went from not believing to, I'm going to prove that this is either nonsense or that it's true. And I'm not going to give up until I have proven to myself the truth of it. So it took me 3 sessions to get past my third dimensional block before I actually had that very powerful experience, and the link below that I had with the mantis being. So I know from personal experience that these beings are real, and they took me. I said to them very clearly, I said, I want to take this as far as it can go, even if it kills me. I thought that meant I was going to get taken on a ship. Now that has not happened in the physical. It's happened astrally more times than I can count. But that didn't happen. So we'll talk about that too. Maybe we'll talk about that in this video. And the reason for that is because they're not third dimensional beings. So for me to go on their ship would mean I'd have to shift to a higher dimension. I do believe that they can shift down into our dimension. They prefer not to do that because if you know anything about this, there are humans that are shooting them down, taking them captive, experimenting on them. And even according to Matt Gaetz, United States Congressman, according to Matt Gaetz, he saw top secret evidence that there are unacknowledged programs in the United States military that are actually doing human-alien hybrid experiments. And the aliens aren't doing it, humans are doing it, according to Matt Gaetz. So things are getting real here. All right, so the typical alien entities of various types, again, we're looking at the different types of interdimensional entities. Humans who have died, I didn't talk about that, but all of my relatives, all of my dead relatives came to me in astral form and communicated with me. Not only that, but they shared with me past lives that I've had with them and the karmas that had a lot of influence over the kind of relationship that we had while they were alive. I saw them in their true form. And I'm here to tell you that all of your relatives, no matter how good or how horrible, they're still alive somewhere. And they're outside of the third dimension, so they're back in their spiritual state, which means whatever you saw in them, all those imperfections are gone. They're now perfect, beautiful beings of light. If you were to see them in their true form, you would be overwhelmed with emotion and want to pray to them like angels. And they would say, I'm just a person like you. So that's the first thing. The typical alien entities of various types, I've experienced those. The grays that you've heard about, those are actually fictionalized beings. There's no such being as the grays. That's made up by unacknowledged secret military programs have made those fake. They make robots out of them. They make mannequins out of them. They pump those things into your brain so you think you're seeing them. But they created that version based on various other ETs. So there are ETs that are similar to the Greys, but there's no such thing as the Greys. They don't exist. But mantis beings are real. Again, the unacknowledged programs have created false mantis beings to frighten you. When you find out who the mantis beings are, I mean, you'll know how full of crap the humans are and what they've tried to make them out to be. So, typical alien entities of various types. The mantis beings, the strangest and most powerful. I'll just tell you right off the bat. So my first real experience was with a mantis being. And there's so much to talk about in terms of what I learned from him, and I'm continuing to learn from them. Mantis beings are not physical. So they don't have a physical reality the way that we understand. I was really happy to hear this because I heard somebody who was talking about a DMT trip where he was talking with mantis beings, and he asked them about them, and they told him exactly what I'm going to tell you right now, which is that mantis beings live in electromagnetic fields. So they have a world, they have a universe, they have a reality that slips into our world in the form of electromagnetic fields, which includes lightning and other things like that. But that's just what leaks into our third dimension. There's a whole reality that's just that, electromagnetic energy. So technically they're like in between all of the dimensions, and inside of the dimensions they're not anything that we would understand as physical. But they're fully conscious beings, they're incredibly powerful and extremely smart, and they create whole universes from where they are. I'm not going to tell you the secret of who they really are, because if I told you, then it would make it even more crazy, but I'll save that for another time. But that's who the mantis beings are, and that's why the mantis beings you've heard of that supposedly abduct and all that, those are fake ETs created by humans. All right, powerful light being councils. So there are councils. This is one of the first things. So one of the things that, by the way, that will happen to you when you do interdimensional communication with light beings while you're conscious. One of the things that, and this is how I know somebody's actually had this experience. Once you've made contact and had an experience, the first thing that happens is you try and talk yourself out of it. So your brain will immediately jump in and tell you that didn't really happen. It'll try and erase it from your memory. It'll tell you that's not possible. And then it'll tell you you made it up. And then you'll feel stupid. You'll feel shameful. So that's your third dimensional brain trying to protect itself. Because if you fully expand into what these light beings are doing, it'll destroy your third dimensional ego. And your third dimensional ego is trying to keep itself alive, so it tries to talk you out of it. How did I get on that subject? Powerful light being councils. So the first time that I met with a council came to me, and I got pulled into the astral realm, and it was a group of 9 beings, different beings. They looked like they were different species of ETs, clearly in a much higher dimensional frequency, because the power that was overwhelming. My body, you could have, the amount of DMT that was going through me at that time was just off the charts. And these beings said, "We are the Council of 9." And I went, "You got to be kidding me." I said that to myself, of course. You don't talk to very powerful beings like that. But inside I said, "You got to be kidding me. I'm making this up. The Council of 9? That sounds like, I know there are New Age people that talk about the Council of 9, and they channel the Council of 9 and all that kind of crazy stuff. So those beings exist. They are very powerful, and there are all kinds of different councils. And the councils are beings that are there to serve consciousness. So they come up with rules and regulations on how to interact and what to do, and what's, they're here to help. So those beings exist. Gods and goddesses. These aren't all of the beings I've experienced, but I have communicated with many gods and goddesses. Now, the reason why this is important is that even though I was technically a polytheist, I did mantra and meditation, and I would do mantras and rituals to certain deities. I'm not sure that I believed that deities were conscious beings. I think I saw them as, archetypes of energies that I was releasing from within myself, which I still believe that's true. There's nothing untrue about that. But I didn't really see them as actual conscious beings. And what blew me away is that they're conscious. In fact, not only are they conscious, they're no different than me or you. The only difference is if you took somebody like me or you and took that conscious personality and put it in, the 11th or 12th dimension, you'd have a god. They have power that is beyond anything we can imagine. They can do things in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. And so we see them and experience them as gods. But they're beings. They're conscious personalities. They're people, just like you. And they will interact with you like that, just like people. So I now, when I communicate with gods and goddesses, it's like I'm sitting down talking to a friend. What's interesting is that at the lower level, like the beings like the mantis beings and the council beings, when you interact with them, you physically feel huge amounts of power. Off the chart kind of higher dimensional electromagnetic power. It's unbelievable. When you talk with the gods and goddesses, the power level can be there, but it's actually most of the time very subtle. And they're not big on that. They're not trying to impress you. And they don't need, it's sort of like when you encounter council beings and other light beings, the unavoidable result is the huge power differential. And so you feel huge amounts of power as you interact with them. But when you're talking with gods and goddesses on such high levels, they're so immanent in everything that you don't have to have that. And the interaction is very subtle. And I find them, they're not really all that interested in making a big splash or getting your attention or impressing you. They're really not interested in that. But they've shown me that, as I've communicated with them, they've shown me that they are in everything. So, something like, I'll ask a specific question and somebody's car alarm will go off. They don't have to do things like, big flash of light in your face. They're saying, we're in everything. We're everywhere. And so they're so subtle, you don't realize that you're interacting with these beings. But I can now communicate with them the same way I communicate with you. One's own higher God self. That is an interesting one. That's one of the most interesting things. My first experience with a higher dimensional version of myself was that I didn't like him. And that hit me like, why? You would think that you'd just love your own self, like you'd narcissistically just fall in love with your higher self, but I didn't. I didn't like him. And I had judgments about him. And after I thought about it, I went, those judgments didn't come from anything. I was actually just projecting onto him the judgments I have about myself. So because he was me, I projected onto him all these negative things. And again, it's your third dimensional ego trying to protect you from expanding into him. Because if I expanded completely into him, I'd stop being on this level of existence altogether. So that's an interesting thing, communicating, experiencing your higher self. And then here are the beings I call the Titans. One would be like the yin-yang source entity, the universal lords. So just to give you an example, there is a pair of gods out there that you could call them one god or two, it doesn't matter. And these being calls itself the Mother Father. And when I first was brought to them, because light beings came and said, hey, we want to introduce you to somebody. And I said, okay. So they took me to this being that was, it was on one side pure light. That was the feminine side. If you ever look at the yin-yang symbol, you've got the big white part and then a black dot in the middle. And you got the black part with a white dot in the middle. So we live in a shadow world, so we see the big part. So in the third dimension, the dark, the black is feminine and the white is masculine. But outside of the third dimension, it's the opposite. The feminine is pure light. So starlight is very often a feminine deity. The stars that are shining, those are feminine deities. The sun, even though we worship the sun as masculine, we're actually worshiping the sun's rays. So the rays of the sun are masculine, but the sun herself, the nuclear fusion that creates the energy that eventually ends up being the rays, the nuclear fusion is the feminine. And if you go back far enough in every tradition, including the Vedic, you will find out that the sun is a goddess. So I saw that. The mother is a goddess. She is the source of all the goddesses and the source of all light. And the masculine was this dark, amorphous, void energy, and there were all these little red sparks of energy, incredibly powerful, kind of frightening at first. And then I was experiencing him, and I was feeling a little frightened because the power was unbelievable. And then he spoke to me and let me know I had nothing to be afraid of. And they both told me they were my parents, and they told me why I had been created, and they told me I was a god, and they told me all the things that I was here to do. And I won't get into all of that because you're a god. I'm telling you this because you're a god. I'm not doing it to make me look good. I'm no different than you. You are exactly the same kind of being that I am. You're just in the third dimension, which means you're not aware that you're an infinite God. And so these beings said, we are the gods that the gods worship. So now we're at a very high level of beings, and these are the kinds of beings I call the Titans. And then there is, drum roll, the ultimate source consciousness, or what people would call God. God, if you want to use that word, God doesn't do anything in our reality. Now, as it turns out, the West African Yoruba tribe, which the vast majority of African Americans are descended from the Yoruba tribe, they believe in a being, they believe in a creator being they called Obatala. And then there's a being above that, which is what we would call God. And that being just is not involved in any of our stuff. It's just out there. And it is the source of all consciousness. All beings, including the gods, come from this, including you. So I've experienced that being and I communicated with that being, and that was an interesting experience. And again, very subtle, not super powerful, like, oh, it was just like, it was very subtle. You know, it's like you go through, as you go up, it gets more and more and more powerful, and then it starts to get more and more and more and more subtle. So there's a point where it starts getting subtle again. So at that point, the energy was very subtle, and this is just pure light. This being is just pure light. And this being says things like, so you realize you're just talking to yourself, right? You realize that I am you. And then I switched, and for a moment I was looking at myself, talking to myself. The source being has every single soul in it. So this is what people talk about when they have near-death experiences and they go into the light and they look around and they see every single soul that currently exists. So you are a holographic projection of this pure source consciousness. And dimensions, so as you go up in dimensions, you're just looking at different dimensional versions of you. So it is very possible, like if you decided to pick a god to worship, Zeus, Thor, I don't know, you would maybe find out that that is a higher dimensional version of you, that that's actually you on, up a few dimensions. Because if you keep following up, everything comes back to that source God. So that source God doesn't have any issues, doesn't have any commands, it doesn't, what we think God is, this being doesn't do that. It's just a being that at some point you decided that you wanted to experience some kind of limited physical reality. And so that was projected out of the source God. And if you go down enough dimensions, you end up here in the third dimension. That's all that happens here. So I could talk about all kinds of other stuff, but we'll leave it there. So those are the beings that I've encountered just by doing the work that I do. So you see here in gray, these are the two practices that I recommend. And I believe that what I'm telling you is the fastest way to shift the earth. It's the fastest way to shift you. Now, if you're watching my channel and you don't do these two practices, you can't possibly know what I'm talking about. And there are so many people on my channel that just watch the channel but don't follow directions. And here's another thing. No God can save you. There is no God out there powerful enough to save you. Only you can make the decision. So when we talk about shifting up to a higher earth, you're going to have to make the decision to do that. Nobody can do that for you. It's not going to happen to you. You are going to make the choice to do that. The most powerful way to punch through this third dimensional reality that we're in and begin existing in higher dimensions are these two practices. So first one is CE5 protocols until you make contact. Don't tell me, yeah, I tried CE5 once. Well, good for you. If you ever want to surf, you're going to have to go out surfing like I did. To learn how to surf when I was 10 years old, I went out every single day for an entire summer. And by the end of the summer, I knew how to surf. Before, at the beginning of that summer, at 10 years old, I didn't know how to surf. So doing CE5 once, good for you, better than nothing, but that doesn't mean it's going to give you the ability to really venture deep into higher dimensions. So if you've done CE5 protocols, and if you don't know what that is, you can go look that up, CE5 protocols. It's a meditation. It's very simple. I'll tell you exactly what it is right now. You get yourself in a meditative state. You imagine that your consciousness comes out the top of your head, comes out up through Earth's atmosphere until you break through Earth's atmosphere and you're in interplanetary space. You send out a mental invitation for any beings of light to come and communicate to you. And whether or not you get a response or feel a response, you then imagine that you're going back down through Earth's atmosphere and inviting these beings to follow you all the way back down. You come back down in your body and you're now inviting these beings to come in, be in your physical presence. That's CE5. It's simple. It's very simple. And you do that until you make contact. If you're having a hard time doing it, it's probably because your frequency is too dense. That's very normal. Your third dimensional mind is protecting you from higher dimensions. So go on to Facebook or some other place and find out where other CE5 practitioners are gathering. Become part of a CE5 group and do it live or do it online or whatever. But don't give up and don't give me any excuses. Whoever you are, I can't do it. I couldn't find anybody. I don't know how to meditate. Don't give me any excuses. This is part of being here. You figure it out. You keep pushing until you figure it out. So that's what I did. I failed the first 2 times, even though you see in the link, I got video and audio proof, but I didn't see it. I didn't know I'd accomplished anything. You keep doing it until you make contact, until you make physical, conscious contact. You don't give up. So that's the first thing I recommend. Second one is to do interdimensional meditation, which we do on this channel twice a week, every Wednesday and Saturday evening at 8:30 p.m. I live stream meditations. If you can make it there, it's 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you can make it, great. If not, I've got them archived, which means they've been recorded. You have to go to the live section on my YouTube channel, LIVE, and you'll see hundreds of previous interdimensional meditations. You can go back a year, 2 years, 3 years, and do any of those meditations. And if you do it regularly, you will make contact. So this is what I believe is necessary, and it is the single fastest way to shift yourself out of this screwed up reality and to meet your God self. When you do this enough, you're going to meet your God self, or you will be shown who you are. You'll find out that you are a God. You might be a God that's been written about in mythology, or you might be a God nobody's heard about, but you are a God. And when you get to that point and you start to integrate that God self into your human self, you're going to find out that, you're going to find out how mind-bending that experience is. You'll grow a lot. It might be intense. It might be challenging, but it's also going to be incredibly blissful. You can get all of the benefits that people get from near-death experiences while still being in your physical body and being perfectly healthy. So if you want all that, that's how you do that. So if you want me to channel for you, which is not a big deal, I just simply, light beings will show up, I'll feel them, and they'll tell me things that they want to tell you. I have no idea what they're going to tell you. So they're not trained monkeys. You can't tell them what to talk about. But they're going to tell you something that's going to be important for you, perhaps past life stuff, perhaps who your God self is. Go to channel.thunderwizard.com. I can do that for you. Go to thunderwizard.com and go to the menu. Go to thunderwizard.com, go to the menu, and then click on memberships. Scroll around there and look for the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. This will give your body the power to release the DMT in your brain, as well as allow your nervous system to handle the higher dimensional electromagnetic fields you'll encounter when you communicate with higher dimensional beings. You can also learn how to work with me personally. That's the best and fastest way to grow and be able to tolerate the changes that will come. That's the best way is to work with me personally. So that's thunderwizard.com. In the menu, click on memberships. Now, if you want to get an experience of this right now, just by doing a meditative practice, I can teach you one. It's very simple and very powerful one. Go to thunderwizard.com, click on shop in the menu, and then look around for summoning the Immortals Qigong. That Qigong practice is like the bat signal. Light beings will come to you and will interact with you depending on your desire and your ability. So check that out. If you want to learn the most powerful practices in existence, you can find it at the shop. And you can also go to maoshan.thunderwizard.com. Those are the single most powerful practices that were taught, I've now come to find out, channeled to humans directly from the mantis beings, the beings that live and control electromagnetic energy. All right, that's it for this video, my friends. You know what to do. I love you. Thank you all for being here. Please be very good to yourselves. I will see you all very, very soon.